Welcome to Tread Talk from Treadmill TV. You can find this episode on YouTube and also on a podcast. Today's episode, we get to talk to Rami Odeh. He's the author of Quiet the Noise, A Trail Runner's Path to Hearing God. We get to talk to him about his book and ultra running and a few other things. If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to subscribe and to share it with a friend. All right, well, now that I know how to pronounce your name, Rami Odeh.
You got it.
Quiet the Noise, Trail Runner's Guide to Hearing God. So I'm going to read a short bio. You tell me if I should add or subtract anything. So you were the founder of Foremost Personal Fitness Training in Georgia. And since 2019, you've been a motivational speaker, writer, coach.
I sold it in 2019. That's important.
You sold it in 2019.
Yeah,
so this is full-time author, coach, everything else.
You got it. Since 2019. Yep.
So you've been a motocross rider, triathlete, ultramarathoner, trail runner, and you've got a general life mission of positively affecting the lives of others. You've written Quiet the Noise, numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
Your website is Coach Rami, Rami.com, and you can find books, educational video courses, and find ways to work with you in person. Is that about right?
That's right, and then you can add at the end, now bodybuilder. So
now bodybuilder.
Yeah, so that's
well,
my
you
latest,
were in the 90s, weren't you?
I never got on stage, but that was my thing before I got into endurance sports.
Okay.
So and I'll tell you a funny story about that when we're live, about trying to do both. Long story short, it doesn't work.
Right. Bulk and longevity don't usually match.
Triathlete,
Yeah. Well, first thing, I'm going to ask some icebreaker questions. I call these my quick feet drills. I'm going to ask a serious, good runner a bunch of silly questions. So I got all these questions from Facebook, like beginning runner groups where they ask all the beginner questions.
Okay.
So they're called quick feet questions because I want you to just answer one word or as quickly as possible.
All right.
Ready?
I'm ready. Are we live?
Yeah, we're going.
Okay, great. Awesome.
So what shoes should I buy?
Asics.
Why does my leg hurt right here?
Where are you pointing to? We're on Zoom.
Right. Well, that's the question. And that's how people ask it on Facebook.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What kind of watch should I buy?
A Ironman $29 watch from Walmart.
Some of the best runners always say that.
Yep.
It says something. How do I make myself poop before a big race?
Coffee.
Where are you running this weekend?
Pine Mountain, Georgia.
How do I get faster?
Interval work.
What's the best running movie?
Born to Run? Was it a movie?
I don't remember.
I can't. Let's say Born to Run, and if it's not, they'll make it a movie.
Okay. True or false? Strava or it didn't happen?
False.
How do you carry your phone when you run?
In a fanny pack.
Have you ever finished a 5K marathon?
No, they're too long.
Doesn't running hurt your knees?
No.
Other than yours, best running book?
Mine. The second volume.
Okay. What do you eat before a big race?
Usually nothing.
Okay. Why don't you just sprint the whole time?
Because it's 100 miles?
And you just eat about anything you want now?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay, those are the 15 quick feet questions.
Wow.
Get to know Rami Odeh. All right. Well, so far, we're off to a good start. So I've got the book here. I actually read it.
Thank you.
Cover to cover. An alternate title that I thought of for the book was How to Slowly Become an Ultra Marathoner. Would that be accurate?
I love that. Yeah, it took a really long time.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Because other than the brief look back in your childhood, the book took place from like late 80s into like early 2000.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about running or like long distance running, it started in 2008, really, right? So, but from a running standpoint, I started when I was 15, so that's a long time.
When did you start doing the Ironmans?
So I only did one Ironman. I did a ton of half Ironmans. I started those in '92.
Okay.
So I'm 110 years old. So I just look really good for my age. So.
Well, that's not too far fetched. I'm listening to an audiobook because I drive a lot for work, and I'm listening to Forever War, and it goes through like the space wars. So the guy's actually 215 years old, but because he's been traveling through space at near light speed, he only looks 40 or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did for this video, Nathan. I traveled through light speed.
Just a coincidence. I've been listening to that book.
That's amazing.
I think a lot of people would attest that they have experienced God during an ultra.
Mm-hmm.
How many races do you have under your belt now?
So I stopped counting at 150.
Really?
And so I'm gonna estimate. I was really addicted to triathlon, a lot of shorter distance stuff. So somebody asked me on another talk, and I'm gonna estimate 300 to 350 right now.
Wow.
And that doesn't include motocross. That's just
Right.
endurance events. Yeah.
But you didn't even do that in high school or college or anything like that. So
No, I didn't run my first 10K till I was 18.
Wow.
So I didn't run, I started running to get in shape for motocross, right? Like, and that's in my book. I absolutely hated running. I used to dread the 1 mile run in high school, and I think my best time was like an 8:05. So I definitely didn't have a genetic, right, speed. And I was like, how could it? There was a guy on my street that ran marathons, and I'm like, he's a moron. Like, why would you do that? And so here I am now,
Well, that's the funny thing, because so many people just assume it's talent, like pure talent, especially when they see American records and people that are winning races. They just assume, well, they don't have to do too much for it. They're just so talented. But I think you're a pretty good example of someone who's just gritty and wanted it and were motivated to do it.
Yeah, for sure, Nathan. I mean, I went to graduate school for exercise science, and one of the things we used to play on all the machines, and we would do our VO2 max all the time, which I wouldn't do it in a heartbeat right now because it's so painful. But I had the lowest measured of the whole department.
Really?
So I was in the high 40s, low 50s of all endurance people, right?
Wow.
So I was, for general population, I was decent. For a runner, I was awful. I think Lance Armstrong's was like 92, Killian's was like 94, so definitely do not have a genetic component, but what I do have is a really good work ethic. So, yeah.
I've heard that ultra running is the new midlife crisis. What do you think of that?
Well, it's really funny. I just had this discussion with a friend of mine he's a runner. We did the New York Marathon together, but thinks ultras he's a doctor and he's a radiologist, so he thinks that ultras are moronic, because he just sees all the other end of it, right?
Right.
And he went to a race with me just to volunteer, and he said, everyone here has a major problem. And I'm like, well, I think that everyone in general has a major problem. I just think ultra runners are more open about theirs.
Right.
But I would say that 90% of the people I know in the sport, it's a crisis of some sort that they're sorting through in what I would say is a really healthy way, as opposed to drugs or alcohol or, and I have a big party past for myself, right? And triathlon is what got me out of it. And I thank the Lord for that all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a crisis, and I don't know if I'm midlife. I'm turning 60 in 4 days. So is that midlife, or I'm going to call it midlife?
Yeah. Well, if you live to 120, that's midlife. Yeah.
I'm living at least that, God willing.
Yeah. I'm reading Katra Corbett's book. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, she's amazing. I love her outfits. And I always, every time I do one of these, I get a new book. What's the title? Because I'm going to write it down.
It's right here.
I'll just search Katra Corbett.
It's within arm's reach. I took the leaf off, but it's Reborn on the Run.
Love it.
Like you said, with Katra and with you, running replaced a running lifestyle. I'm just going off my notes here. We just kind of seem to run right into it. And so we can keep moving on. You answered that. What do you think the difference between quiet time at home versus quiet time during an endurance run or long bicycle? Do you think one's better?
Yeah, well, for me, so I'm just going to speak from my own experience. That's why I wrote the books. I can't have quiet time at home until everything is done. I'm one of those people, right? I don't even look at Facebook during the day, right? I can't, till I decompress at night, which is typically only about an hour before I go to bed. That's my only quiet time, or first thing in the morning, right? Before everyone wakes up, before it starts. So it's kind of limited at home, right? And the rest of my day is chaotic and noisy. And so for me, what running, and specifically running on trails, did is it just quieted that noisy mind, and that's where the book started, right? it's a different type of quiet. And I find I got a bad review because that means you're getting real reviews, by the way, if you get a 1 star, And it said, how can this guy write a book and he wears the headphones when he runs and he's talking about quieting the noise? And I said, I didn't respond, but I was thinking the guy didn't get it. It's not about music. That's not noise to me. That's spiritual and uplifting, right? Mm-hmm. The noise is the internal negative voice, the repetitive, oh my gosh, you messed up at work and it won't stop. That's the noise.
Okay.
Running with beautiful music in nature that's quiet to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I run with my phone and people are like, well, how can you do that if you want quiet? Well, I said, when I'm good, which is not all the time, I put it on airplane mode and I put on whatever music is fitting my mood for that moment. By the way, Metallica fits my mood sometimes, right? And that's not noise to me,
Well, there's a difference between noise and sound.
100%, I don't do a whole lot of podcasts when I'm running because I do like to focus on them a little more. I know people like to do that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's music. And music is one of those things that enhances my thinking process. Like I can listen to music while doing accounting, right? There's no way I could listen to a podcast.
Right.
It would distract me. So, so that hopefully that answers the question between the two.
Yeah. And I think that gets to the point of the book, too, which is it's not being quiet just as in silence. It's quieting everything else that needed to be quiet.
Yeah. And it's also seasons in life. I mean, there was a time when I was writing that book where it would take me 3 hours on the Appalachian Trail before the noise would quiet down. I'm in a really good season in my life now, and it takes 10 minutes, right? But I know that season can come back, and I'm fully grateful, and I know it can happen, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a litmus test I use for what's going on in my life. Is how long does it take me to decompress? Like my wife said that we went on vacation, and it used to take me 6 of the 7 days to decompress. I would have one day, right, when I was running my gym, and then now it takes half a day. I decompress at the airport on the way out.
Wow.
So that's a blessing,
And there is a cost to having a lot of solitude and quiet time, because you wrote on several occasions about the balance between work and life and family and training and everything else. So how do you manage that? I think you're saying you've sold the business in 2019. So that's one way that you've eliminated one thing.
Right.
But for most people that are working 40, 50 hours a week, what's one thing that you could help them do to help keep that balance and still train?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I got during that time, because it was a really, really hard time. I mean, I started doing ultras during the worst recession of my life, right? 2007 for us, it lasted to almost 2014. It was 5 years in my business, because I'm a high-end fitness place.
Right.
Think $300 a month versus $10 a month, right? So those people really, it was tough during the recession, and it was really tough. So for me, it was making it invisible to my family. I use that term a lot. So early mornings were my thing. My family sleeps in on the weekend, praise God. So I had many times where I got up, did a 3-hour run, come home, took a shower, had breakfast, and nobody was even up yet.
Wow.
And so I would sacrifice the other end, right? So I would go to bed earlier, but I would be very present with them all day. And same thing with work, right? Like, when it's funny, Nathan, when I sold my business, for a month, my wife kept saying, you don't have to get up at 3:45 in the morning anymore, right? Because because I had done that for 20 years. Our gym opened at 4:15, and so I was 3:45 up and out the door, and so now I get to sleep in till 5 o'clock. It's amazing, right? And ironically, when you talk about selling the business, I'm probably 3 times as busy now as I was when I ran my gym.
Wow.
And I'm probably 5 times as happy. So I'm doing multitude of different things, and my appointment basis is, like I literally had a call right up until this, and I have a call right when we're done, right? But I'm so happy that it doesn't feel that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's a sign that you need a break?
For me, or just people in general?
I think it's something that could apply to most people.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's typically when I find myself losing motivation. And I'll give you an example. In 2007, I got up for what ended up being my last triathlon, right? And I got up at 4 a.m, and I looked at the alarm clock, and I hit the snooze button. And I had never done that in 150 races before. and I hit the snooze button again. And driving down there, I was dreading it. Never had happened to me. I used to wake up excited, and I decided during that race, I finished the race and I said, you know what, it's time for something new. So for me, this is ultimately, it's a hobby, like I'm not killing journey, like I'm not winning anything, right? And same thing with my newest, what I'm doing now, my newest BHAG, as I call them. You know what that is?
No.
Big, hairy, audacious goal.
Oh.
Actually comes from David Horton. So I went to one of his talks, and he talks. The guy that he had the Appalachian Trail record for a while. Okay. He had Across America record. He's a trip. And BHAG. So for me, it's like if I'm losing that joy. Now that doesn't mean days don't grind. You got to grind. There's days where you don't want to do it. That's different. Where you still get up but you feel great when you're done. Mm-hmm. This was like I didn't want to do it, and I felt horrible when I was done. I was done. Now, didn't do another triathlon, right? Mm-hmm. And then I went like trail running, and I was like, oh my God, like this is what I love right now. This is what I need. So it's all about motivation for me. If you find that if the grind is like 3 weeks long, you might want to move on to something else.
Okay.
It's time for a break.
There's a line from the book I'm gonna read, and then like to hear you explain it or expand on a little bit. It's been said that our God accommodates our human limitations by making himself available to us in ways we can receive him. Certainly, that is at least part of what the incarnation is about, and that is what the story has been about. So, first of all, explain what incarnation is and what that quote means to you.
Yeah, I mean, it can mean different things to different people, right? One of the things I've learned in my journey, I didn't become Catholic till 2008, so I'm a late bloomer with the religious side. My wife's a cradle Catholic, and I was brought into it because my children were going to Catholic school. So don't quiz me on the Bible, okay? Right. I'm a baby, right? But I mean, Jesus coming back and coming to life through Mary and all that incarnation that way, and that he came as a human, right? I think that's what I hear in that. By the way, 1,000 people are going to read that and get 1,000 different, views of it. But to me, at that time or now or whenever, God realized we needed a human who was, like us, right? Like we could relate to him, but also was God incarnate, right? So that was the big thing. And I think that's what he does, right? I think that's what the Lord does. And then to me, getting back to the books, I think he's doing it all the time, whether you're religious or not, constantly. It's the noise that blocks it, right? It's not that, oh gosh, God is now speaking to me. Right. He just gave me this message. He's been doing that forever. And I always say he whispers and then he talks louder and then he yells, like with an injury, right? Like, oh, my knee hurts, right? Oh, my knee is bleeding. Oh, wait, I have a bone sticking out, right? Okay, God, I should have got you the first time. And I'm stubborn and I need to learn with the bone sticking out. So that's why it took me so long to come to it. So I know that's kind of a convoluted answer, but I think the answer to it is there's 1,000 answers. Right. And yeah.
Well, one other thing that I wanted to talk about is the intersection of faith and sport. Do you know the old name Eric Liddell or Eric Liddell, depending on who you ask?
Of course. Yeah.
Chariots of Fire.
Yeah.
And he's on one side of the spectrum, or he actually quit at the peak of his athletic career to go be a missionary in China, where he died in a prison camp just shortly after he gave up his ticket home. He said, no, I'll stay. This woman, I don't know if it was a pregnant woman, but a woman went in his place, and then he died shortly after of cancer, I think it was. And Eric Liddell is pretty famous for saying, I can feel God's pleasure when I run. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who have a religion or a Christian faith, and they're more of the chest bump, fist kiss, and point to the sky type of people. Where do you see faith intersecting with sport in general and running in particular?
Yeah, I think I think one of the reasons that people have bought and enjoyed my book that are actually atheists, and I've had conversations with them, and practice Judaism and practice, Islam and, don't practice anything, and is because to me, faith is bigger than the church that you go to, right? And faith is a belief in something bigger than yourself. And being a runner and, having done ultras and all that, you have to believe there's something bigger than you to get through mile 74 at 3:00 in the morning. Like you can't, like one of my things, I do a talk based on my 100-miler about goals. And I say, without having a support system and making it bigger than you, you're not going to make it. And I don't care what that is, by the way. It just has to be bigger than you. So I'm not like, oh, you're not Christian, I'm not talking to you.
Right.
Gosh, no. Like, in fact, people don't know this, but Catholicism actually means universal. We are actually the most accepting religion on earth, but nobody knows that because we have a horrible marketing department.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm so accepting of everyone, including atheists. I love the conversations, So to me, that's the intersection is faith means it's bigger than me, and that's going to carry me through, right? So, that's good for you, but it's also good for others, So.
Okay. Well, let's continue talking about goal setting. Page 130 of the book. This is book 1 of 3. Yep. I didn't read the other 2.
You didn't read all 3? I'm off this thing right now.
Well,
I'm glad you read 1.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And because I've heard interviews of people that have not read the book of the person that they're speaking to, and it's obvious. Like they may have gotten through chapter 1 or something like that. But so your goals for the race, 1 through 5. First and foremost, connect with the Lord somewhere along the path. 2, finish the race. 3, finish the race without injury. 4, finish the race without injury, feeling strong and smiling. And 5, finish the race without injury, smiling, feeling strong and smiling in under 12 hours. So one of the things I did when I was a cross-country and track coach was goal setting. And it was pulling teeth, especially with high schoolers and even more so with middle schoolers. But it was pulling teeth because their goal, they just wanted to write, I'll run 20 minutes for the 5K, or I will run X or whatever. I'll improve my friendship with my teammates or something like that. And goal setting was such a hard thing because some of it is intangible, like team building or feelings, things like that. But I liked your list because you had an A goal, connect with the Lord. B goal, finish the race, and then C, D, E through, and you probably have had other goals where you just have an entire litany of things.
Yeah, you come up with 10 more during the race.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make it to that tree before the car hits me.
Exactly.
So when you set goals with people, whether they're runners or not, what type of list that do you have them fill out, or how do you set goals, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I'm getting better at it. I'm figuring it out, right? And been probably coached over 1,500 people at this point, so I definitely have a good base for this, right? And for me, what I've learned in 30 years is, number one, the goal is figure out your why. And without that, nothing matters. My rule is the first couple of phone calls with you is we're figuring out why did you set up coaching with me. I don't really care about your goal, right? Because I have to know your why, and that has to be powerful and emotional. And we're going to keep peeling back the onion until we get it, right? And then this is something I've changed in probably the last 5 to 7 years. Then I work the Dave Ramsey way. I set baby step goals because my clients and everyone in the world right now is so busy and so overwhelmed that if we set a 5-year goal, it doesn't mean anything to them. So we set the simplest goals, and all those stack on each other. I'm a big fan of atomic habits, right? Like goal stacking and habit stacking. And that's what we work on. And guess what? If they haven't hit that 1 week goal, which by the way, that might be drink 10 ounces more water every day this week. That, get up 10 minutes earlier, something like that, right? If they haven't hit that, guess what? We hit it again the next week, right? And those habits stack up to hit the 5-year goal, which is, lose 100 pounds or run an ultra marathon or, get on stage for bodybuilding, whatever it is their goal. I love that, getting back to the BHAG. But the BHAG means nothing without a why. Right. And so, if you read my second book, that's my first 100-miler, my only 100-miler. And I had so many whys, there's no way I wasn't going to finish that thing. I did it, and I made it public, and I'm a big peacock, right? Like I tell everybody about it. And there's no such thing as an unselfish act. I'm not doing that just for them to get inspired. I'm doing it for me. Now I have accountability I have 17,000 followers on Facebook, right? And they're all going to be, hey, how was the race? And how's your training and all that? So, yeah.
So part of the why is just the accountability too.
100%. 100%. And the why can be basic. That's what people are like, oh, it doesn't need to be like I want to save the world, or, I don't want to die from a heart attack. It could be, I want to see my abs.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to.
Yeah.
That's mine right now at 60, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've never committed to bodybuilding before, and so I switched gears a year ago, and we can talk about that if you want, but, my goal was, like, quite frankly, to be transparent, I want my wife to see my abs for the first time in our 23 marriage.
Yeah.
She's pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
Of course, I go to bed at 8 o'clock because I'm so tired, but other than that,
Yeah, well, there's a cost to everything, right?
Cost to everything, yeah. So it's all about the why.
So we've got just 4 minutes left, and I've run through my questions. So let's talk about what you're doing now. When people contact you or companies contact you, what are they looking for? What did they get?
Great, appreciate that. And by the way, I always throw this out. We talk about it, and you're going to mention it, CoachRami.com. Anybody who sees this, wants a free coaching call, put your information in. I'll send you my Calendly, and this is offered to all your people. So I saw one of yours had 900,000 views, so I hope 900,000 people call me in the next week. So right now, I switched gears completely. So to getting back to when is it time to take a break? Got burnt out. Did the Bighorn 32-miler in Wyoming. Beautiful race. Pretty much hated every step of it. Maybe the first hour I enjoyed it. Never been more miserable in a race. It was a 32-miler. I was at mile 27 at aid station for 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Trying to talk myself into finishing. And the guy's like, you got to walk back to your car, so you might as well do it through the finish line. I think it took me 10 hours to do a 50K. It was just insanely horrible. So I was done, and I was like, what do I want to do? And one of the things for me is I've never fully committed. You and I talked about this off air. I've always tried to be a good runner who also looks good at the beach, which, as we know, is really hard, right? Like, I even tell my clients, if you want to run an ultramarathon, unless you have amazing genetics, be okay with being what I call skinny fat.
Yeah.
You'll look great in clothes, but you'll have no muscle definition, maybe in your legs, right?
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do a bodybuilding, right? And my whole life, it's been a powerful why for me, but I never did both. So real quick story, and we have 2 minutes. When I was in grad school, my professor stood me up in front of the class, made me take my shirt off, I'll never forget this, and say, this is a guy who tries to do both. He's a mediocre triathlete and a mediocre bodybuilder. That guy was badass, right?
Wow.
And it stuck with me, and that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I finally fully committed. I stopped running completely December of last year and hired a coach because I'm a big believer in coaching.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a mock bodybuilding. So I'm doing a photo shoot on my 60th birthday, which is in a week. So
wow.
I'm dieting right now. So if I say anything dumb, that's why.
Yeah.
And then my goal is, I set a goal, is that if I don't look too bad in the pictures, I'm going to do it again, a real show in 2023. And so you asked about how do people, CoachRami.com, the contact page is the best. I do individual nutritional coaching, everybody from somebody who just wants to lose 20 pounds to somebody who wants to be leaner for a 100-miler to corporate clients. I do corporate wellness. I'm really, really so happy to be back in-person speaking again. That's my real joy and love. So we can book that as well. Obviously, I love to talk, right? So I love being on stage. And really just start a conversation. Go to the contact page. If this resonates, if I resonate with you, let's just chat. No charge, no obligation, and let's see if there's a fit somewhere. I'm a big believer in that. I think Jason Koop once said, the best coaches are the ones with the best network. So for me, if I'm not a fit for you, I got 20 more other people that will be, and I'll refer you out, no problem at all.
Yeah, and that's something I have photography clients, video clients, and sometimes I would take it personally, like, oh, I'm not good enough because they didn't want me. And sometimes it's just not a fit, and that's not a cliche. It's just true.
Yeah. I had a client hire me specifically because I was Catholic, and she was like, "Oh, we're gonna, it's gonna be great. And we're gonna talk religion." And then she was like, "But I do everything on Strava," and I'm like, "I'm not your coach.
Yeah.
I'm more like I'm very free flowing. I'm much more in the art of coaching than I am, but I also know all the science.
Cool. Well, we're out of time.
All right.
The book is Quiet the Noise, Trail Runner's Guide to Hearing God. You're Rami Odeh. Thank you for your time.
I love it, man. And by the way, real quick, if you order on the site, it's signed and I mail it to you directly. Well, you can do Amazon.
Well, I should have done that last time.
I know. So great to meet you, brother.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Have a good one.
See ya.